a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire was an American dancer, singer, actor, choreographer and television presenter. He is widely regarded as one of the most influential dancers in the history of film and television musicals. His stage and subsequent film and television careers spanned a total of 76 years, during which he starred in more than 10 Broadway and London musicals, made 31 musical films, 4 television specials, and issued numerous recordings. As a dancer, he is best remembered for his sense of rhythm, his perfectionism, and as the dancing partner and on-screen romantic interest of Ginger Rogers, with whom he co-starred in a series of 10 Hollywood musicals. Astaire was named by the American Film Institute as the 5th greatest male star of classic Hollywood cinema in 100 years. 100 stars. Gene Kelly, another renowned star of film dance, said that the history of dance on film begins with Astaire. Later, he asserted that Astaire was the only one of today's dancers who will be remembered. Beyond film and television, many dancers and choreographers, including Rudolph Nureyev, Sammy Davis Jr., Michael Jackson, Gregory Hines, Mikhail Baryshnikov, George Balanchine, Jerome Robbins, and Marjorie Dixit, also acknowledged his influence. 1899-1917, Early life and career. Fred Astaire was born Frederick Emanuel Austerlitz on May 10, 1899 in Omaha, Nebraska, the son of Johanna, Anne, and Frederick Fritz Austerlitz. Astaire's mother was born in the United States to Lutheran German immigrants from East Prussia and Alsace. Astaire's father was born in Linz, Austria, to Jewish parents who had converted to Roman Catholicism. Astaire's father, Fritz Austerlitz, arrived in New York City at the age of 25 on October 26, 1893, at Ellis Island. Fritz was hoping to find work in the brewing trade and moved to Omaha, Nebraska, where he landed a job with the store's brewing company. Astaire's mother dreamed of escaping Omaha by virtue of her children's talents, after Astaire's sister, Adele Astaire, revealed herself to be an instinctive dancer and singer very early on in her childhood. Johanna planned a brother and sister act, which was common in vaudeville at the time for her 2 children. Although Fred refused dance lessons at first, he easily mimicked his older sister's steps and took up piano, accordion, and clarinet. When their father suddenly lost his job, the family moved to New York City in 1905 to launch the show business career of the children, who began training at the Alvin Master School of the Theatre and Academy of Cultural Arts. Despite Adele and Fred's teasing rivalry, they quickly acknowledged their individual strengths, his durability and her greater talent. Fred and Adele's mother suggested they change their name to Astaire, as she felt Austerlitz sounded reminiscent of the name of a battle. Family legend attributes the name to an uncle surnamed Lastaire. They were taught dance, speaking, and singing in preparation for developing an act. Their first act was called Juvenile Artists Presenting an Electric Musical Toe Dancing Novelty. Fred wore a top hat and tails in the first half and a lobster outfit in the second. In an interview, Astaire's daughter, Ava Astaire Mackenzie, observed that they often put Fred in a top hat to make him look taller. The goofy act debuted in Keyport, New Jersey, in a tryout theater. The local paper wrote, "The Astaires are the greatest child act in vaudeville." As a result of their father's salesmanship, Fred and Adele rapidly landed a major contract and played the famed Orpheum circuit in the Midwest, Western and some southern cities in the United States. Soon Adele grew to at least 3 inches taller than Fred, and the pair began to look incongruous. The family decided to take a 2-year break from show business to let time take its course and to avoid trouble from the Gerry Society and the child labor laws of the time. In 1912, Fred became an Episcopalian. The career of the Astaire siblings resumed with mixed fortunes, though with increasing skill and polish, as they began to incorporate tap dancing into their routines. Astaire's dancing was inspired by Bill Bojangles Robinson and John Bubbles Sublette. From vaudeville dancer Aurelio Coche, they learned the tango, waltz, and other ballroom dances popularized by Vernon and Irene Castle. Some sources state that the Astaire siblings appeared in a 1915 film titled Fanchon, The Cricket, starring Mary Pickford, but the Astaires have consistently denied this. By age 14, Fred had taken on the musical responsibilities for their act. He first met George Gershwin, who was working as a song plugger for Jerome H. Remix Music Publishing Company, in 1916. Fred had already been hunting for new music and dance ideas. Their chance meeting was to deeply affect the careers of both artists. Astaire was always on the lookout for new steps on the circuit, and was starting to demonstrate his ceaseless quest for novelty and perfection. The Astaires broke into Broadway in 1917 with Over the Top, a patriotic revue, and performed for US and Allied troops at this time as well. 1917-1933, stage career on Broadway and in London. The Astaires followed up with several more shows, and of their work in The Passing Show of 1918, Heywood Brown wrote, "In an evening in which there was an abundance of good dancing, Fred Astaire stood out. He and his partner, Adele Astaire, made the show pause early in the evening with a beautiful loose-limbed dance. By this time, Astaire's dancing skill was beginning to outshine his sister's. Though she still set the tone of their act, and her sparkle and humor drew much of the attention, owing in part to Fred's careful preparation and strong supporting choreography. During the 1920s, Fred and Adele appeared on Broadway and on the London stage in shows such as Jerome Kern's The Bunch and Judy, George and Ira Gershwin's Lady, Be Good, and Funny Face, and later in The Bandwagon, winning popular acclaim with the theatre crowd on both sides of the Atlantic. By then, Astaire's tap dancing was recognized as among the best, as Robert Benchley wrote in 1930. "I don't think that I will plunge the nation into war by stating that Fred is the greatest tap dancer in the world." After the close of Funny Face, the Astaires went to Hollywood for a screen test at Paramount Pictures, but Paramount deemed them unsuitable for films. They split in 1932 when Adele married her first husband, Lord Charles Cavendish, second son of the 9th Duke of Devonshire. Fred went on to achieve success on his own on Broadway and in London with Gay Divorce, while considering offers from Hollywood. The end of the partnership was traumatic for Astaire, but stimulated him to expand his range. Free of the brother-sister constraints of the former pairing and working with new partner Claire Luce, Fred created a romantic partnered dance to Cole Porter's Night and Day, which had been written for Gay Divorce. Luce stated that she had to encourage him to take a more romantic approach. "Come on, Fred. I'm not your sister, you know." The success of the stage play was credited to this number, and, when recreated in the Gay Divorcée, the film version of the play, it ushered in a new era in film dance. Recently, film footage taken by Fred Stone of Astaire performing in Gay Divorce with Lucy's successor, Dorothy Stone, in New York in 1933 was uncovered by dancer and historian Betsy Betos, and now represents the earliest known performance footage of Astaire. 1933-1939, Astaire and Rogers at RKO. According to Hollywood Folklore, a screen test report on Astaire for RKO Radio Pictures, now lost along with the test, is reported to have read, "Can't sing, can't act, balding, can dance a little." The producer of the Astaire Rogers pictures, Pandro S. Berman, claimed he had never heard the story in the 1930s and that it only emerged years afterwards. Astaire later clarified, insisting that the report had actually read, "Can't act, slightly bald, also dances." In any case, the test was clearly disappointing, and David O. Selznick, who had signed Astaire to RKO and commissioned the test, stated in a memo, "I am uncertain about the man, but I feel, in spite of his enormous ears and bad chin line, that his charm is so tremendous that it comes through even on this wretched test." However, this did not affect RKO's plans for Astaire, first lending him for a few days to MGM in 1933 for his significant Hollywood debut, where he appeared as himself dancing with Joan Crawford in the successful musical film Dancing Lady. On his return to RKO, he got fifth billing after fourth-billed Ginger Rogers in the 1933 Dolores Del Rio vehicle Flying Down to Rio. In a review, Variety magazine attributed its massive success to Astaire's presence. The main point of flying down to Rio is the screen promise of Fred Astaire. He's assuredly a bet after this one. For he's distinctly likable on the screen, the mic is kind to his voice, and as a dancer he remains in a class by himself. The latter observation will be no news to the profession, which has long admitted that Astaire starts dancing where the others stop hoofing. Having already been linked to his sister Adele on stage, Astaire was initially very reluctant to become part of another dance team. He wrote his agent, "I don't mind making another picture with her, but as for this team idea, it's out. I've just managed to live down one partnership and I don't want to be bothered with any more." However, he was persuaded by the obvious public appeal of the Astaire-Rogers pairing. The partnership, and the choreography of Astaire and Hermes Pan, helped make dancing an important element of the Hollywood film musical. Astaire and Rogers made 9 films together at RKO, including The Gay Divorcee, Roberta, Top Hat, Follow the Fleet, Swing Time, Shall We Dance, and Carefree. 6 out of the 9 Astaire-Rogers musicals became the biggest moneymakers for RKO. All of the films brought a certain prestige and artistry that all studios coveted at the time. Their partnership elevated them both to stardom. As Katharine Hepburn reportedly said, "He gives her class and she gives him sex appeal." Astaire received a percentage of the film's profits, something extremely rare in actors' contracts at that time. Astaire was also given complete autonomy over how the dances would be presented, allowing him to revolutionize dance on film. He is credited with 2 important innovations in early film musicals. First, he insisted that a closely tracking dolly camera film a dance routine in as few shots as possible, typically with just 4 to 8 cuts, while holding the dancers in full view at all times. This gave the illusion of an almost stationary camera filming an entire dance in a single shot. Astaire famously quipped, "Either the camera will dance, or I will." Astaire maintained this policy from The Gay Divorcee in 1934 onwards until his last film musical, Finian's Rainbow, made in 1968, when he was overruled by director Francis Ford Coppola. Astaire's style of dance sequences, which allowed the viewer to follow the dancers and choreography in their entirety, clearly contrasted with the Busby Berkeley musicals, which were known for dance sequences filled with extravagant aerial shots and dozens of cuts for quick takes and zooms on certain areas of the body, such as a chorus row of arms or legs. Astaire's second innovation involved the context of the dance. He was adamant that all song and dance routines be seamlessly integrated into the plot lines of the film. Instead of using dance as spectacle as Busby Berkeley did, Astaire used it to move the plot along. Typically, an Astaire picture would include at least 3 standard dances: a solo performance by Astaire, which he termed his sock solo, a partnered comedy dance routine, and a partnered romantic dance routine. Dance commentators Arlene Croce, Hannah Hyam and John Mueller consider Rogers to have been Astaire's greatest dance partner, a view shared by Hermes Pan and Stanley Donen. Film critic Pauline Kael adopts a more neutral stance, while Time magazine film critic Richard Schickel writes, "The nostalgia surrounding Rogers' Astaire tends to bleach out other partners." Mueller sums up Rogers' abilities as follows: "Rogers was outstanding among Astaire's partners not because she was superior to others as a dancer, but because, as a skilled, intuitive actress, she was cagey enough to realize that acting did not stop when dancing began." The reason so many women have fantasized about dancing with Fred Astaire is that Ginger Rogers conveyed the impression that dancing with him is the most thrilling experience imaginable. According to Astaire, Ginger had never danced with a partner before flying down to Rio. She faked it an awful lot. She couldn't tap and she couldn't do this and that. But Ginger had style and talent and improved as she went along. She got so that after a while everyone else who danced with me looked wrong. In his book Ginger, Salute to a Star, author Dick Richards quotes Astaire saying to Raymond Roauer, curator of the New York Gallery of Modern Art, "Ginger was brilliantly effective. She made everything work for her. Actually, she made things very fine for both of us and she deserves most of the credit for our success." When asked who his favourite dancing partner was by British TV interviewer Michael Parkinson on Parkinson in 1976, Astaire said, "Excuse me, I must say Ginger was certainly the one. You know. The most effective partner I had. Everyone knows. That was a whole other thing what we did. I just want to pay a tribute to Ginger, because we did so many pictures together. And believe me, it was a value to have that girl. She had it. She was just great, for her part." Rogers described Astaire's uncompromising standards extending to the whole production. "Sometimes he'll think of a new line of dialogue or a new angle for the story. They never know what time of night he'll call up and start ranting enthusiastically about a fresh idea. No loafing on the job on an Astaire picture, and no cutting corners." Astaire was still unwilling to have his career tied exclusively to any partnership, however. He negotiated with RKO to strike out on his own with A Damsel in Distress in 1937 with an inexperienced, non-dancing Joan Fontaine, unsuccessfully as it turned out. He returned to make 2 more films with Rogers, Carefree and The Story of Vernon and Irene Castle. While both films earned respectable gross incomes, they both lost money because of increased production costs, and Astaire left RKO after being labelled box office poison by the Independent Film Journal. Astaire was reunited with Rogers in 1949 at MGM for their final outing, The Barclays of Broadway, the only one of their films together to be shot in Technicolor. 1940-1947, drifting to an early retirement. In 1939, Astaire left RKO to freelance and pursue new film opportunities, with mixed though generally successful outcomes. Throughout this period, Astaire continued to value the input of choreographic collaborators and, unlike the 1930s when he worked almost exclusively with Hermes Pan, he tapped the talents of other choreographers in an effort to continually innovate. His first post-Ginger dance partner was the redoubtable Eleanor Powell, considered the finest female tap dancer of her generation, in Broadway Melody of 1940, in which they performed a celebrated extended dance routine to Cole Porter's Begin the Begin. In his autobiography Steps in Time, Astaire remarked, "She put him down like a man, no ricky-ticky sissy stuff with Ellie. She really knocked out a tap dance in a class by herself." He played alongside Bing Crosby in Holiday Inn and later Blue Skies, but, in spite of the enormous financial success of both, was reportedly dissatisfied with roles where he lost the girl to Crosby. The former film is particularly remembered for his virtuoso solo dance to Let's Say It with Firecrackers, while the latter film featured an innovative song and dance routine to a song indelibly associated with him, Putting on the Ritz. Other partners during this period included Paulette Goddard in Second Chorus, in which he dance-conducted the Artie Shaw Orchestra. He made 2 pictures with Rita Hayworth, the daughter of his former vaudeville dance idols, the Cansinos. The first, You'll Never Get Rich, catapulted Hayworth to stardom and provided Astaire his third on-screen opportunity to integrate Latin American dance idioms into his style, and the second, again with Rogers, was the Dingozo dance from The Story of Vernon and Irene Castle, taking advantage of Hayworth's professional Latin dance pedigree. His second film with Hayworth, You Were Never Lovelier, was equally successful and featured a duet to Kern's I'm Old-Fashioned, which became the centerpiece of Jerome Robbins' 1983 New York City Ballet tribute to Astaire. He next appeared opposite the 17-year-old Joan Leslie in the wartime drama The Sky's the Limit, in which he introduced Harlan and Mercer's One for My Baby, while dancing on a bar counter in a dark and troubled routine. This film, which was choreographed by Astaire alone and achieved modest box office success, represented an important departure for Astaire from his usual charming happy-go-lucky screen persona, and confused contemporary critics. His next partner, Lucille Bremer, was featured in 2 lavish vehicles, both directed by Vincente Minnelli, The Fantasy Yolanda and The Thief, which featured an avant-garde surrealistic ballet, and the musical revue Ziegfeld Follies, which featured a memorable teaming of Astaire with Gene Kelly to The Babbitt and the Bromide, a Gershwin song Astaire had introduced with his sister Adele back in 1927. While Follies was a hit, Yolanda bombed at the box office, and Astaire, ever insecure and believing his career was beginning to falter, surprised his audiences by announcing his retirement during the production of Blue Skies, nominating "Putting on the Ritz" as his farewell dance. After announcing his retirement in 1946, Astaire concentrated on his horse racing interests and in 1947 founded the Fred Astaire Dance Studios, which he subsequently sold in 1966. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know